Hey there and welcome back to another My Hero Academia video. And recently, I've talked a lot about the villains of My Hero Academia, discussing their previous arcs and their relationships with other characters, and where their story seems to be leading in preparation for the end of the manga. So that's a lot of videos solely talking about the villains. And in my opinion, that's fair enough. A lot of the time, the villains of a series are actually more interesting than the heroes. And honestly, I think My Hero Academia is no exception to this general trend. But today I thought I'd take a slightly different tack and talk a little bit about the heroes of My Hero Academia and where I think their story's leading, and more specifically, what's their end game? How do they finish off the series? Do they die? Do they thrive? What's their involvement in the finale look like? And look, let's be real, I think these answers only really matter for a couple of the heroes. Maybe one or two of the adults, and then maybe 3 or 4 of the kids as well. I mean, does anybody really care about what manga's endgame is? Didn't think so. So we'll just be addressing the characters that have been foreshadowed to be properly big-time plot relevant. Anyway though, as you might have guessed, this is going to go beyond the scope of just the anime itself and talk about some really significant manga spoilers. So if you're an anime-only fan, or have fallen behind in the manga, beware, here there be dragons. And so, with all that being said, now we can properly jump into the video. So we can start off quite simply with Endeavor. Now in my view, Endeavor's the character that's probably undergone the most drastic shift in character. When we first meet him, he's just the worst. The classic abusive dad who pushes his son way too hard and treats him like an object. A method of getting one over on All Might. More than he treats him like an actual child who he loves and cherishes. And this mistreatment manifests itself in his eldest child becoming a serial killer, his daughter a classic enabler, his second son hating his guts, and his youngest son also hating his guts. Oh, and did I mention he tormented his wife to the point that she was institutionalized? Jesus, that's a lot to be getting on with for any character. I mean, hell, that reads like a villain backstory, not the number one hero. But over time, we've seen him come to terms with what he's done and regret his actions. He doesn't seek to earn forgiveness, but rather to atone for his sins and to allow his family to come back together and heal, even if he's not able to be part of that process. And in pursuit of that goal, we've seen him buy a new house for his children and his wife to live in without him there. He's tried to be supportive for his son and open up his heart to his other children. He's tried to be a better and more involved parent, have family dinners, text often, all of that stuff. But then he finds out that it turns out his eldest child's gone full serial killer and wants him and his family dead. Oops. Father of the Year contender there, hey? Anyway though, how does his story end? I mean, surely his involvement in the finale is inevitably going to lead to a clash with Darby, right? I mean, I feel like that needs to be his big battle. Yeah, as of the latest chapter he's up against All For One, but I'm guessing there's going to be a switcheroo at some point. Because honestly, I don't see how a happy family reunion ending for Endeavor can ever really feel earned at this point. Realistically, a big character needs to bite the dust in this final battle. Well, a big hero at least. And Endeavor is a prime candidate for this. It wraps up his arc nicely, in that all his family is going to get to heal from their trauma and come together as one, whilst at the same time he doesn't truly get to be a part of it, just like he thought in his dream. And obviously, he would have to die facing Darby, if I didn't make that clear enough. And then that brings us to Shoto. I really think it only makes sense for him to go next. And obviously, based on my previous thoughts about Endeavor's arc, I expect him to be half orphaned by the final chapter of the manga, because it creates that nice bittersweet feel. He never really got to truly forgive his father in life. He had that opportunity taken away from him. But despite that, he can still live his dad's dream for the family and try to work together to heal their bonds and soothe their grief, at both Endeavor's death and Darby's eventual fate, which if you've watched my villain version of this video, you'll know I think it thematically makes sense for him to end up in that hospital that Ray was in for so long, where he too can seek not forgiveness, but atonement for all the pain he's caused. And next up for the major character endgames, I want to take a look at Deku. And well, Deku we already know partially. We already know that after the events of the story, he's going to become the number one hero. This is basically his origin story, his retelling of how he came up through the ranks and burst onto the scene. So obviously he's not going to die. And I think it's also quite obvious that his arc will entail facing off against both Shigaraki, who really has been presented as his personal nemesis for some time, and against All For One, who really is just pretty much the primary antagonist at this point of the story. He ain't dying, he ain't losing, he'll beat them both, and he'll go on to fix Japan alongside his classmates. I feel like that is really the only ending for him that makes any sort of sense, and ties into his whole arc about being a powerless nobody and transitioning into becoming the greatest hero the world has ever seen. And from here, we can then springboard to Bakugo. And in the end, I think it's clear that he's going to sit forever in the dreaded second place, the number 2 hero, the second fiddle. And simply based on his characterization and overall arc throughout the run of the series, that's actually quite a good spot for him. His whole life he's strived to be the best, but has not gone about it in the right way and fell into a toxic mindset. He bullied his friends and isolated himself. He encouraged his childhood friend to kill himself for being quirkless and daring to try and be a hero anyway. Basically, he feels like Proto-Endeavor, an example of how that sort of mindset starts to take root. But already, we've seen him start to peel away some of those toxic layers, see him start to take accountability for his negative behaviours, start to walk the path of atonement. We've seen him apologise to Deku and stand in and protect him when he needs to. We've seen him bond with the other characters. Yes, he's still rude and abrasive, but that's kind of just who he is. I mean, look at his mum. So really, what more could you want from his character endgame than for him to become Endeavor if Endeavor didn't succumb to those feelings of inadequacy, if he didn't project them onto somebody else? Bakugo's already done that once before. That storyline has been for the most part dealt with in his interactions with Deku and his actions to try and work with him to enhance both their quirks together. Plus, he got impaled trying to save him. I don't think that you can reasonably say that he isn't on the path to becoming a better person at this point. Yeah, he'll probably always talk shit about how he's going to become the number 1 hero someday and leave Deku in the dust, but it's never going to escalate beyond the banter. It's not going to become a toxic obsession like it would for Endeavor. And it will show that Bakugo really has been able to learn from his mistakes and the mistakes of those around him to become both a better hero and a better person. And as for what he's going to get up to in that final clash, my heart wants to say he's going to have an epic 2 vs 2 alongside Deku fighting against Shigaraki and All For One. But realistically, he's going to be out for the count and taking a long nap whilst Deku gets to clap them 2 vs 1 after awakening his hidden power or something like that. To me, that kind of just does feel inevitable at this point. And finally, this brings me to Uraraka. Because let's be real, of the rest of the heroes, her story is probably the only one that's going to matter outside the other characters. Everybody else is going to get a generic heroes win ending where they're all happy and proud of Deku, All Might included. But Uraraka will probably get a little bit more. 1, because she's a rival of fan favourite Toga, and 2, because she's the main love interest of Deku. So obviously, she's probably going to get a little bit more of an endgame than some of the other characters, realistically revolving around Deku. Hell, it even looks like her final fight against Toga is going to have Deku as an addition. So I guess her whole endgame is just going to be about him. And I mean, they really did plant the seeds for that in her last couple of chapter appearances, with her basically becoming his PR representative. So yeah, I guarantee her endgame lines directly up with Deku's. They take down Toga, and then he goes off to save the world, and she cheerleads from the sideline? I don't know. It feels like a bit of a waste, but at the same time, from the story perspective, her quirk cannot compete with these other guys. So perhaps it's for the best for her to stay off to the side, instead of just getting embarrassingly clapped and becoming a liability. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. And I know I haven't really gone into too much depth about a fair number of the different heroes, but realistically, not everybody gets a big moment or a huge endgame. Some characters, despite seeming like a big deal for a long time, may only get a line or two addressing what their endgame is. And that's okay. There are limited pages, you can't have everything. But these are the characters that I guarantee are going to have something bigger than the rest. But with all that being said, these were just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think the hero's endgame is going to be? What makes you think that? Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and let me know.